employer members across the UK. Our mission is to equip employers to support all their employees impacted by domestic abuse and to share best practice with other employers. We endeavour to bring about constructive change, leading to a society where survivors thrive and where domestic abuse is not tolerated. Today's Insight Hour is about effectively communicating about domestic abuse within your organisation. With the 16 Days of Activism coming up, which is the 25th of November to the 10th of December, we'll showcase the campaign materials created for you to use within your organisation and highlight how to keep domestic abuse on the agenda all year round. We'll also be shown the brilliant training resources that AXA have created, which are available for any company globally for free. We'll take questions from the audience at the end of the session, so please use the Q&A box to ask questions throughout. The audience will also have access to the chat function, so you can use that. It'll be managed by one of the EIDA team, and as ever, please just be mindful of the impact on others on what you choose to say in the chat or on social media. We encourage everyone to post on LinkedIn or Blue Sky from the event, and you can tag us at EIDA.org. Just to let you know, we'll be recording this Insight Hour and sharing on YouTube within the next couple of days. We appreciate domestic abuse is a challenging topic, so please feel free to step away from the webinar and seek support at any time. Now, to the session, I'd like to invite the participants to introduce themselves briefly. Welcome, Kristin, Jessica, and Rajinder.
Thank you so much, Catherine, and great to see everyone here on the Zoom webinar. My name is Kristin Thuet, and I'm the Communications Manager at EIDA.
Hi everyone, I'm Jess Hardy. I am the Inclusion and Belonging Lead for AXA UK.
Afternoon everybody, I'm Rajinder Pryor. I work in the rail industry and I'm also one of the EIDA ambassadors.
Great, thank you so much everyone. If I could get the slides up, Catherine, then I'll be ready to go. One second while we reload the slides. Great, thank you so much. So I lead the communications for the Employers Initiative on Domestic Abuse, and with over 2,000 employer members, we've collectively amassed some learnings about what's really useful, what works really well, things to avoid, and just general tips and tricks that will make your communications internally within your workplace about domestic abuse easier and captivating for your unique workplace audience and externally as well. So I'm going to be showcasing some of our resources that we can use to help you, and otherwise also just sharing the general tips and tricks that I have learned being EIDA's communications manager for over 2 years now. Next slide, please. Thank you. So one of the really, really key things to think about when you plan your communications around domestic abuse is the 4 boxes up here, which is thinking about your audience, because of course every workplace is unique. Some workplaces are entirely office-based, which means that you'll have access to all of your employees via a company email. You'll have all of the digital channels available to you. Whereas if you are like one of our members' UK Power networks, all of your employees will be based out in the field, literally working out on the power lines. And so you have to think about, who is my audience? Who constitutes my workforce? Will I be able to reach them via digital channels? Do I need to think about physical channels? Maybe if you have retail workers, for example, working out in the field, one of the only ways that you might be able to communicate with them could be via their pay slips. So just thinking about the channels that you have available to you, and also who constitutes your audience. You know, do you have a very one gender dominant workforce? You know, do you have mostly female employees, male employees? Do you have a lot of young employees who might be facing different challenges as opposed to an older workforce that are and transitioning into your retirement, for example. So having a think about who you'll be communicating with. Another key point is to think about timelines when you plan your communications, and we'll get into the details on how to launch your communications. But I always recommend sitting down and thinking about your next year or so of communications, because it just means that you'll have a bit of an overview of the activities that you have planned, and you can filter in communications about domestic abuse when you communicate throughout the year. Last but not least, having a think about allies. So who are your allies in the organization? EIDA works with all kinds of employers to implement a domestic abuse response in their workplace. And we often find that the typical person who leads on the domestic abuse response is often in HR or has a sort of people or inclusion function or workplace safety function. But I would recommend allying yourself with someone from the comms team, just because they'll have great knowledge about communications in general. And so making sure that if you have a working group, for example, that is implementing your domestic abuse response, that you have communications represented there so that everyone is aligned. Next slide, please. I always say that being an EIDA's communications manager, it means that I have to think about 365 ways to get the message out that domestic abuse is a workplace issue. It's a business issue that affects employers. And one of the things that I have learned is that you can really center the vast majority of your communications around a quite simple array of some key messages. And I've put up these 4 to give you an idea of what those key messages might be. So the first one, which often still catches people by surprise, is that domestic abuse can really happen to anyone. I think in the dominant narratives around domestic abuse in our society, we usually imagine a female victim and a male perpetrator. I don't think that many people imagine, for example, a Black man as a victim of domestic abuse. And so really focusing on that key message that domestic abuse can happen to anyone, regardless of their gender, their ethnic background, their religion, their socioeconomic background, their sexual orientation, and not least their level of seniority. The second key message that I would recommend focusing on is that domestic abuse is not always physical. I think a lot of us still imagine domestic abuse as physical violence. And that's one of the reasons why EIDA always uses the term domestic abuse rather than domestic violence, just so that we're sure that we're capturing those other forms of abuse, such as coercive control and that psychological abuse, which is so common as well. The third key message is what counts as abusive behaviors and using examples of very concrete types of behaviors that would constitute abuse, such as isolating someone from their friends and family, monitoring what someone does during their day, using pets or children as a way to control someone's behavior, deciding what someone gets to wear, and just being extremely concrete about the types of behaviors that constitute abuse, because that way you make sure that not only are you aiming your messaging at victim survivors in your workplace, but you're also reaching potential perpetrators who use abuse to control other people. So you've got yourself covered in that. No one can come out and say, but I didn't know that that was abuse if you've already communicated about it. Last but not least, which is incredibly important, is that abuse often continues after an abusive relationship is ended. It's so important that we don't say to survivors, why don't you just leave? Because leaving might not make the situation any better and can be a risky time for anyone. So to keep that in mind, that post-separation abuse is a very real thing. Next slide, please. So the comms around launching your response are really important, because when you've launched your response, that is when your employees will become aware of all of the work that you've done behind the scenes to implement your domestic abuse response in your workplace. It's so important that you have senior leadership support for your response in general, but also that senior leadership are visible and out there talking about the fact that your company has a domestic abuse response in place. And they should talk about it in a way that, you're really signaling that this is a well-being and safety response that we have. We're proud to have it. This is something that we're doing to protect our employees, because culture really starts from the top. And so having a senior leader communicate that to your employees and also externally creates a really virtuous cycle. The second point on the survivor voice, it's really interesting because every single time EIDA hosts an event or we do any comms of our own, we always find that the part that people remember the best is when we have victim survivors of domestic abuse telling their story and sharing their experience. There's nothing that really can replace that sense of authenticity and that lived experience. So if you're launching your comms, if you've got a big kind of event or anything to kind of celebrate your launch, or you're doing your first comms of domestic abuse, having a survivor story component can be incredibly useful. EIDA has got our wonderful group of ambassadors. We've got our Rajinder here today with us, who's going to share some of her experience. And if you don't have any internal survivors who will have come forward, which is unlikely in the early stages, you can see if there's any external pieces of comms that you can use to really get that survivor voice in there. I've also made a note on the point of inclusive language, because again, we need to think about that point that domestic abuse can happen to anyone. So when we talk about domestic abuse, we just need to be careful that, we use gender inclusive language. If we're using concrete examples, we can say, my partner or they instead of he and she, etc. Because we've had an insight hour on male survivors of domestic abuse before, and I think we can really acknowledge that there is still a high degree of stigma around male survivors, and so we want both women and men, anyone from different kinds of backgrounds, to feel included in our response. So having a think about language. EIDA has got a language guide resource that you're welcome to access and use if you need any inspiration on language. When it comes to launching your response and communicating around the launch, I'm a big fan of events. I don't think there's anything that can really replace that sense of being in a room together, creating that sense of momentum, and kind of marking this as, if not a happy occasion, at least a momentous occasion where your company is really taking steps to showcase their commitments to the well-being of their employees. And so just making sure that once you've done all of your comms around the launch, you've planned it, you're hosting the event, just making sure that you've got your response in place in time for that, so that people like managers and HR will know what to do if they receive disclosures, because you are very likely to receive disclosures after launching a response like that. We receive disclosures when we talk about domestic abuse in organizations, so making sure that that is all lined up. Next slide, please. And then on to keeping domestic abuse on the agenda in the long term, because once you've launched, what do? You want your response not just to sort of sit there. You want it to be a living, breathing thing that everyone who comes into the company is aware of, in addition to your regular employees. Because I think we all know that once we receive a piece of news about a company policy or something like that being updated, that's not necessarily at the forefront of our minds. So I always say that communications need to be clear, they need to be regular, and they need to be visible. So that comes back to our point on channels and audiences. Is it most suitable perhaps to send out comms about domestic abuse in a regular company newsletter? Or if your employees are out there and not on their computers, but out in the field in the real world, things like posters, which I'm going to come back to later, but posters in a private place, such as on the back of bathroom stalls, might be the most effective way to reach them. Next slide, please. And here I've got my best tips on ongoing communications to achieve impact in the long term, because I do realize that any workplace will have lots of different competing priorities, lots of things that they want to communicate about. And so just ensuring that you have that regular drumbeat of communications about domestic abuse. So for your internal communications, I really recommend using key awareness dates, such as 16 Days of Activism, International Women's Day, Pride Month, etc., so that you can make sure that you've just got those hooks throughout the year on which you can hang your domestic abuse comms, and having a think about what other internal communications are you already issuing that you can tag the domestic abuse message onto. Do you have HR newsletters? Do you have mental health awareness workshops where you can leaf in some communications about domestic abuse? Do you have staff networks that talk about employee well-being and different types of challenges that different types of employees come across? In which case, insert comms about domestic abuse into that. Not least, external comms. And it's really nice because when you communicate about your domestic abuse response externally, you sort of create that virtuous cycle where your employees will see those external comms as well and be like, oh, I didn't realize that we had an internal domestic abuse response, but now that I've seen it in the newspaper, I do know. And I'm happy to share that lots of our members who become members of EIDA, they do press releases and they've gained a really good amount of positive trade press, sometimes also national press, when they announce it. So if your organization hasn't announced their EIDA membership publicly, I would really recommend doing so as well. So keeping those comms up on social media, talking about them when you're doing, business to business events, sector roundtables, things like that, keeping it on the agenda and having your senior business leaders talk about it when you liaise with other businesses, because there's, again, nothing that can really replace that senior leadership voice. As this is about taking a stand as an organization, and it's something we're proud to have for our employees. Next slide, please. Now this is exciting. So we are about 1 week away from the kickoff of the global campaign, which was started by the United Nations, the 16 Days of Activism, which is a 16-day campaign that runs from the 25th of November, which is the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, and it runs to the 10th of December, which is the Global Human Rights Day. And this is a great occasion to post, to showcase your internal resources, to talk about domestic abuse, to dispel some of those myths, leverage those key messages that we talked about. And EIDA, we issue a resource pack for our members to use every single year. So this is a picture of our current resource pack for 2025. So for this year, we have created 16 posters for the 16 days. All of them contain a quote from a victim survivor of domestic abuse. I've put Rajinder's poster up here as she is an EIDA ambassador, and that QR code links to an audio that each of the victim survivors have recorded where they talk about an aspect of their experience. So they talk about how domestic abuse has affected them during their working lives, and also the support they have received from their employers and how much that matters. And that audio also links directly to support. So anyone who listens will be able to access support if they themselves or someone they know and love are impacted by domestic abuse. You can find this poster pack. We'll also be highlighting it on our social media throughout the 16 days. On the EIDA website, you log in to the members' resources, you click on campaign and the 16 Days of Activism 2025. Now, I'd highly recommend that you hang these posters up somewhere where they're going to be visible, but not public. So, for example, at the back of toilet doors or in slightly more private spaces, maybe not by the coffee machine, just so that people can access them when they're in a quiet space and in their own time. Next slide, please. And I've just included a screenshot of our campaigns page on the EIDA website. So when you go into the member resources and campaigns, this is what you'll see. You'll find the resources for 16 Days of Activism 2025, but we also have resources for the 2 prior years. So we've got more posters, we've got guides, handy guides that any organization can implement, even if you don't have any budget at all for your domestic abuse response. We've also got slightly more creative things like a book club if you want to discuss domestic abuse in depth. And we're also linking to other domestic abuse campaigns that are running in the UK throughout the year. And we just launched a campaign in September of this year where we explored the impact of domestic abuse on Black communities, which includes an employer guidance resource. So please do access that if you haven't already. Next slide, please. Last but not least, I've also just included a screenshot of our mailing that we sent out, because we sent out a link to the resource pack so that everyone knows where to find it. If you're not on the website, we sent this out on the 27th of October this year. So if you go through your inbox, hopefully you should have received it. And it was also linked in our 4th of November newsletter, which is called the Tuesday Trio. If you haven't signed up to the Tuesday Trio, please go to our website, and on the front page, if you scroll down, you'll find a link to sign up. And you can always contact us at support@eida.org.uk if you're an EIDA member and you can't locate your mailing, and we'll help you find the resources. Thank you so much. I'll hand over to Jess. How do you?
Hi everyone, thanks Kristen. It's absolutely great to be with everyone today. Thank you so much for having me along. As I said at the beginning, I'm Jess Hardy and I lead on inclusion and belonging for AXA UK. I've worked for AXA UK for 18 years, so a long time in AXA, but also the financial services insurance industry. If we go to the first slide, please. So I guess if you're just thinking about starting out on your commitment to supporting victims and survivors of domestic abuse, where does it start? So for us, I think it was a bit of a light bulb moment. We are a workforce of nearly 8,000 employees in the UK, and we recognised that we would have individuals affected by domestic abuse, but also have perpetrators in the business. And we thought we really needed to heighten the importance of opening up conversations around this sensitive topic. So we started our journey in the UK in 2022 with a policy and a guide. And that policy started with offering support and guidance, but also 5 days leave. And when we launched, we did the external comms, as Kristen said, and it was picked up by trade press. But it wasn't really talked about within the insurance industry. And one of the things I'm really proud of, that in the last 3 years, we have changed that, and the industry are talking about it. And seeing an event on domestic abuse at the Dive-In Festival, which was organised by the Insurance Family Network, amplifies how far we've actually come. And I think it truly demonstrates that as an industry, progress and the positive effects of that snowball has really worked for us. So a big shout out to Gemma Jackson to getting that on the Dive-In agenda as well. In 2024, AXA globally took a global stance that actually we needed to do more across the world, across every entity, to tackle domestic abuse and sexual violence. So there was an ask that every entity across the world had a domestic abuse policy, and the UK leading on that was something that I was really proud of, and we were able to give our policy to other entities around the globe. And we're now in a position where every entity across the AXA group does have a domestic abuse policy. We also introduced train contacts, and we did our initial training with business in the community. And I think Kate, who did the training, might be on the line today. And those trusted contacts are available for anyone to speak to who's affected by domestic abuse. We are used sometimes by individuals directly who need support and guidance, but also managers who may be supporting someone within their team as well who is experiencing domestic abuse or sexual violence. And I'm really privileged to lead that team of contacts alongside my colleague Ollie Mattock in our employee relations team. In June this year, our UK retail business launched an initiative to support our customers of car and home insurance experiencing domestic abuse. And that means there's a dedicated team that our customers can speak to within AXA Retail, who can offer support navigating insurance whilst going through the situation that they're in, a personalised plan from Women's Aid, and access to a support fund if needed. And we also can support them with banking and employment and CV writing. And we also work with SmartWorks, which helps them prepare for any interviews and make sure they've got clothes for that occasion as well. And in the summer, we also started working with We Thrive, which is a recruitment consultancy run by Sarah Brown that helps survivors of domestic abuse get back into work. And I'm really pleased to say that we've placed 2 roles recently with the help of Sarah. Next slide, please. So why is communication key? I think it starts with care. Talking about it really shows that you're putting well-being at the heart of your culture. And for me, I think it is that snowball effect that is so powerful. The smallest conversation can lead to so much. And I think there's a lot of stigma still associated with domestic abuse and the impact that it can have. And the more that we can do to talk about it, the stigma will reduce. And I feel like it also breaks down stereotypes. I think there are people that generally used to think it wouldn't happen in the insurance industry, that wouldn't happen to our colleagues, and actually making sure that people understand it can happen to anyone is really, really important. If you're talking about it, people will think that the workplace is a safe space, and that's so important. If work is your only safe space, having a culture of psychological safety is really, really important. And as I said, the smallest conversation can lead to bigger conversations and real change. And I'm a true believer that communication equals awareness, which equals support. And having people in the organisation who understand the signs of domestic abuse and can offer support and resources to help is really, really powerful. And it really is just the right thing to do. and it's really, really needed. And I think there's people who I've spoken to within our organisation who were affected by domestic abuse as a child and kind of said, oh, I wish I knew now what I didn't know then. And I think that shows how far we have come as well. And I love it when employees say to me, oh, would you like to come and talk to our governors about it at the school I work with and things like that. So it's that small change can then lead to more impact out in society as well. Next slide, please. So safe spaces. This year, AXA launched Safe Spaces. And out of all the projects I've ever worked on in my 18-year career, I have to say this is one of the ones I'm most proud of. And thanks to Kirsty Levers and Carleen Clifford for making that happen for me. Safe Spaces is a training which is designed to help employers and individuals to create safe and supportive workplaces for employees impacted by domestic abuse and sexual violence. It's been designed with expert support, and it helps direct to appropriate NGOs and charities. It includes authentic stories and expert testimonies, and it uses the 3R methodology to help navigate how to respond to that. So that's recognise, respond, and refer. It does point people to the Know More Global Directory of Support Services, which now covers over 200 countries, and that was developed in partnership with the UN and the World Bank Group. And I think the great thing about the Know More Foundation is that we've actually used it where we had a situation with someone in a country, and we were able to go there, offer that support, and we've just seen it come to life in real life, which is sad in some respects, but great to see that it does work. It's a completely free and free resource, and it's open to everyone. And I hope that we get the message out there and people use it and companies use it to really promote the important messages around it. You don't need a license fee or anything, and I'll drop the web link into the chat when I finish speaking. If I could go to the next slide. So when you go onto the website, this is just a little bit around what it looks like. So this is a screenshot, and we've, as I said, we've used the Know More Foundation, but we also worked with Gallup, La Maison de Femmes, Mankind, Dr. Alison Gregory, and Omni Productions helped us produce the videos. If you go to the next slide, please. So the training pathway, so it's a modular type approach, and there's 4 modules. So each comes with a video. It takes you about 15 minutes to complete it. You can do them individually, or you can do them in one first swoop. So if you were to do that, probably be about an hour's worth of training. It's currently in English and French, but we are currently having it translated into 9 other languages as well. So just keep updated on the website, and we'll get the other languages added as well. We are going to show the video in a minute from one of the trainings, but just before I do that, so as I said, we use the 3 R's methodology of recognise, respond, and refer. There is you can exit the course at any time via a button which is on the right hand side of the website, and the banner for the Know More Foundation stays with you wherever you are on the training as well. So if people do need help, then they can easily access that. Now, I've watched the video that I'm about to show a couple of times, and it is really hard hitting. So please be mindful of your own well-being. And if you need to take a break or want to leave and come back, it runs for about 6 minutes. So please feel free to do that. So if we could move to the video, that would be great.
Yeah. Sure. Okay. So if we can arrange it that you're available for the Tuesday meet, Maya, and then we'll pick it up after that. Have you got everything you need? Okay. Fine. So moving on to the remainder of the week, we have the board presentation on Friday. Daniel, how are you getting on with that? Yeah. Oh, listen. Sorry, something's come up. Is it possible if we pick this up tomorrow? Tomorrow morning? Yes. Is that okay? Check calendars. Yeah, no, sure. Sure, check calendars. Okay. Great. Yeah, thanks. See you then. Dear Sarah, I hope you're well. I'm reaching out because I feel I can trust you with something personal. Something that's affecting me, which I feel is impacting my work. This is difficult to share, but I am currently experiencing a challenging situation at home involving my husband, which I need you to treat with the utmost discretion. I'm doing my best to manage things, but there may be times when I need some flexibility, support, or understanding, whether that means adjustments to my schedule, time off for legal or personal matters, or simply knowing that I have a safe space at work. I want to ensure you that I remain committed to my role, but I felt it was important to be open about what I'm going through in case it affects my performance or availability. I know it's not an easy topic, and I appreciate your understanding in advance. Please let me know if we can arrange a time to talk privately. I look forward to hearing from you soon. Kindest regards, Maria.
So,
Yeah, you got my email.
I did. Thank you. Well, the first thing you should know is that we have things in place to support you, okay? But it needs to be your decision as to how we proceed, if that's what you want to do. But whatever the route, we will be here for you.
Thanks.
Listen, you don't have to tell me anything you feel uncomfortable sharing, okay?
Michael has standards that if I don't meet, I'll know about it. He'll intimidate me, punch walls, throw things. He'll apologize afterwards. I'll listen, reassure him. He scares me and I comfort him. Listen, Sarah, whatever's happening to me, I don't want it to affect things here. I need to be able to come to work and have this normality. It's the only time I feel like me.
Listen, Maria, your job is safe. We have policies in place, support networks with specialist advice, and HR will help. And if you want me to action anything, you just let me know.
I just don't know if I'm strong enough to do it, to just go. He's a very difficult, controlling man. He'd make it impossible.
Whatever your decision, we would make sure we were there to support you, one step at a time. Promise me you'll keep talking. The email, this, it's a good start.
Thank you, I will. Sarah, if I wanted to speak to someone, you have everything in place.
Absolutely, as best I can. You would just let me know and we'd get things started.
Okay, good. Well, let me think about it.
Please do. We'll be here for you.
So that's Maria's story. I'm sorry, I think the sound quality wasn't great, and I think there might be an issue with the actual website as well. I think it's a Cloudflare outage. I'm not even going to pretend I know what that is, but that's what Helen has said. So as I said, in video format, so that goes sort of like through the responses as well, and then there's a written write-up for each section on how to navigate that situation as well. So I'm just going to finish off by sharing some few things that I feel like we've learned along the way with our domestic abuse journey. People will tell you it's an uncomfortable subject, therefore don't do anything. That is absolutely not the right thing to do. It is an uncomfortable topic for some, and that's okay, but it doesn't mean we can ignore it. You must talk about it within your workplaces. People managers and leaders play a massive part in supporting people on a daily basis, and they need training on this and they need support. So if the situation arises, they know how to handle it. You can't fix the problem for the person, and that can be so frustrating. But what you can give is good support and direct them to specialist charities that can actually help. And my final thing is just around the diversity of people that you have supporting. When we launched our trained contacts in the UK, we were all very white and heterosexual. So it became apparent that some of the cultural aspects to domestic abuse, we weren't really in a position to advise on. And whilst we'd had training, we had people ask them to speak to someone like them. So we are about to train some further contacts to ensure that we have a good diverse mix of people available for people to speak to. I appreciate that, as I said, the video was hard hitting. If anybody would like to connect after the call, then you can get me on LinkedIn, or you can reach out to Kristen and she will send you my email address. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jess. That was incredibly powerful. I, for one, am really inspired by the film. It covers so much of what we always tell people when it comes to recognizing, responding, and referring to a colleague, acknowledging their bravery, validating their experience, and also giving them some of that power back. The fact that in that interaction, the manager was able to say, it's your choice, it's up to you, we've got support available, but at the end of the day, this is really going to be led by you. And that is so important for victim survivors who have had a lot of the control of their lives taken away from them. So be able to offer some of that back is incredibly powerful. So thank you so much for that presentation. I'm hoping everyone is gonna take you up on the offer to use Safe Spaces training, because it's free and available and just a great resource. And now we're going to be moving into the discussion. So I'm going to invite Rajinder as well to come on camera. And I want to really invite you, Rajinder, to talk about your experience as a survivor of domestic abuse and how your employer reacted in their response to you when you first disclosed your experience.
Sure, thank you. That video was very, very relatable for me. So I do encourage people to share that video far and wide. So in terms of my experience, I think up to the past couple of probably years, I think not that I think, I was living my best life. I'd come from, for some context, I've come from a very broken family. I've been marred with various forms of domestic abuse, and I found myself in a circle of domestic abuse, and I think some of the myths around and assumptions around victims and perpetrators is something that is something that I'd like to just raise. It's not always partner to partner abuse, and I found myself in a family drawn into a family environment that I couldn't get out of, and I think if I didn't have my employer, and if my employer hadn't reacted the way they had, I would have found myself very, very isolated. Albeit I have a husband and 2 children who understood, but the fact that I didn't have a wider network still leaves me feeling very, very isolated. So previously in my life, I've worked for an employer who had a very different approach. I think this is decades on, and I think at that time there wasn't the kind of conversations being had with employers around domestic abuse. So they, during that time there wasn't anything in place. So earlier this year, I found myself in a situation completely came as a surprise, where I was where I found myself being strangled and attacked by a male sibling. The situation escalated so quickly, I didn't realise what was happening. Fortunately for me, the police were called by somebody that had witnessed it, and I was still on the floor when the police arrived. And I have to say, the policeman and the policeman and the female police officer were particularly attentive. They completely understood the situation, and I think that really did help me. In terms of going to my employer the next day, I think the first thing was that I felt really comfortable to disclose. I felt my line manager understood and acknowledged the situation. I didn't feel under any pressure to talk about work. I think the priority was about me. And I remember one of the things that my line manager said was, "What do you need?" And I think that was a very pertinent question. Not asking me. Just ask me what I needed. And I recall saying, I just need you to listen to me. I just need you to, I just need somebody to listen to me and understand what I'm going through. And I think part of that was because it was very triggering for me. Because, I found myself back in the same situation with somebody who had previously been a perpetrator. And I think for me, thinking that people change, and I had had decades where I'd not had an incident, made me realise that I'd gone back into a dangerous situation without realising it. So I think the fact that I was asked what immediate support, and the fact that I was listened to, and also the fact that my immediate priority was, I need to keep myself safe. I can't come into work. I'm not able to go into meetings, and I need to contact the police because I need to be safe. And an understanding around that okay, you're not able to work, and being told to just shut off and do whatever I needed was necessary. And I think one of the practicalities around this was my line manager saying, okay, so how do I contact you? In the worst case scenario, are your contact details up to date? Do we have your contact details for your husband, etc.? So it was, there are real practical some questions in terms of, if we can't get into contact with you, I'll be worried, who do I contact? And I think, in hindsight, that really gave me reassurance that they understood the gravity of the situation and the situation that I found myself in. And I think being able to openly talk about the situation without any judgment, being able to sort of, you know, I didn't think about going to the doctor and saying, well, if you're going to the police, then you know, I suggest you go to the doctor as well, and really putting my well-being at the forefront was, you know, it was a real positive experience for me, and I felt like somebody was in my corner.
I'm so glad that you had that positive experience with your employer, Ginger, and you raised so many important points. I mean, crucially, making sure that people know what domestic abuse is and the fact that it doesn't just happen in intimate relationships, as you say. Because when it comes to the point of, you know, we talk about leaving the abusive relationship, but you can't just get a new family and leave your family. So recognizing that you really need to have that long-term support, because this is likely a situation that's going to go on for some time. So the fact that employers are aware of that is so important. And the second thing that I just wanted to comment on is your point on that empathetic response, because I think sometimes employers get worried that, oh, you know, we're supposed to know everything about domestic abuse and to be able to like give people expert advice. And that's not really what all of this is about. You know, this is about empathy and just listening to someone unjudgmentally, because usually that is what survivors want and need. They don't need an employer to come in and fix the situation for them. They just need someone to listen in that moment and show that empathy and understanding, because then they will hopefully feel confident going forward. And as you say, contacting the police, contacting their GP, and accessing that specialist support as well. I'm going to hand over to Jess just for a second, because having heard Ginger's experience, how did the considerations of the survivor experience impact the creation of the Safe Spaces training? You know, how did you go about it and making sure that you really centered that authentic lived experience?
Yeah, so we worked with a number of survivors on the campaign in sort of like the research element, and kind of just saying, like, what was your experience when you disclosed to your employer? And I think they were quite mixed, to be fair, is the answer. And I think something for me, which is really powerful, which Regina said, is that first reaction is everything. In that moment, you are really brave and say, this happened to me. That first reaction is key, because that's when it can go horribly wrong. And if it goes horribly wrong in that first instant, that person might not go and tell anybody else. So they might not seek the help they actually need. They might not go to the police, because you probably are to them someone that they should be able to trust. So you need to make sure that you can reciprocate that. I also think it was really helpful speaking to a range of survivors in terms of breaking down stereotypes. I think there's still a bit of a like, it just happens to people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. That's not true. So I think by speaking to various different people, we were able to look at the sort of different scenarios as well to break down those stereotypes. But for me, that first reaction is the big thing that we used from our survivors to say, you know, if it goes wrong, then that could be them not saying anything for ever again.
Yeah, that's so important. You're really hammering home that point on that first disclosure being such a momentous occasion. So I hope that's something that sticks with everyone who's on this call. I'm mindful of the time as well. So speaking of first response, I mean, what has the response internally and externally been for AXA UK and Virginia, for your employer as well? I'll start with Tess and then come back to you.
So we're really proud to be leading in this area. I think it's had a positive impact on people feeling that they're safe within the workplace, but also for our customers as well, that they have somewhere to go. And we are going to do a big internal launch on Safe Spaces next week. So looking forward to getting it out across our UK employee base as well, and really promoting it as a tool they can use not only within work but also out in their communities as well. As I said earlier, so if they were a school governor, for example, or they work with another charity, making sure that they're taking that to them as well.
That's super interesting, and also expanding that response out to the community is something that EIDA also advocates for as part of my four-phased approach to implementing a domestic abuse response, first internally and then kind of escalating it out onto, you know, the community, competitors, supply chains, etc. Rajinder as well, what's it been like for you, you know, both if you've shared with colleagues your experience, but also the wider domestic abuse response of your employers? What have people reacted to that?
Well, I think the fact that I am very vocal, and I'm very comfortable in sharing my vulnerability around this, and it's given me a real purpose to do so, and to drive some real positive change across the rail industry. And I know we've got a number of colleagues from the rail industry, so I think what it's enabled is for some real open conversations, and for those conversations to sort of move in corridors and in rooms that I'm no longer in, because other people are taking those conversations going forward. I think one of the other things that's really important was my line manager was male, and it was quite revealing for me that speaking to a male wasn't difficult, because he was a really supportive ally. And I think that's really, really important to have that allyship. And I think, it was mentioned earlier, because it's that allyship, especially in organisations or industries where the balance is, we're still working on the balance in terms of gender balance. So there may be more men either in, across the industry or in senior roles, etc. So having that allyship is really important, and it allows others who may be in similar situations, or who may still be on that journey in terms of admitting to themselves that they're in a domestic situation, and being able to have the courage to speak out.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point. And I think when we communicate about domestic abuse in general, it's so important, again, to really focus on that this is something that affects us all. Everyone knows someone who's been affected by domestic abuse, even if it hasn't happened to us personally. Every workplace will have victim survivors, and probably also perpetrators. So keeping that conversation alive. I'll quote Patrick Ryan, the CEO of our partner charity, Hestia, who says that we need to have the conversation on domestic abuse in the workplace loudly and often, because that message is always going to be new to someone. We work with it, so we think that this is a connection that everyone makes. But of course, there are so many people who don't know what domestic abuse is. They don't know where to access support. And so keeping that conversation alive in the hallways and across all levels of the businesses, I couldn't agree more, is so important. Before we move into the question segment, I would just like to invite you both to share a final insight on what 16 Days campaign means to you. The fact that we've got this global campaign against domestic abuse, and the fact that employers are taking action. What does that mean for you personally and professionally? Ginger, if you'd like to go first.
Well, I think for me, it's 16 Days of Action is a time to really put a spotlight on the work that needs to be done throughout the rest of the year. So I think it's not just 16 days and it's over. I think it's just a time to really focus on this topic. I think also it's a time that get more people engaged, get the conversation going, take some real action. And really encourage people to open up and to speak up, because as you said, it's something that is a workplace issue, and if we don't get comfortable talking about it in the workplace, then we're missing on supporting people who really do need that support.
Thank you, Ginger. And Jess.
Yeah, I would agree. I think for me, it's an opportunity to make a small snowball that turns into a large snowball. It's very icy today, so I thought I'd use the snow analogy. And I think that small thing, like over the next 16 days, turns into something much, much bigger. And that might start in your organisation, but that might then go to your partners, people that you work with from a procurement perspective. And I think personally for me, there's something around, if we're talking about it in companies and organizations, and someone actually thinks that's me, I need help, and I think that's so powerful. And it could just be that one small thing where they say, actually, this has happened to me, or this is happening to me, and I actually need to talk to someone.
So true. And I can only say that I hope EIDA's growing membership, the fact that we were started in 2017 and now we've got over 2,000 employers collectively employing over a quarter of the UK workforce, that is testament to the fact that employers are increasingly clocking onto this and recognizing that when we spend, a third of our lives at work, that your workplace having this in place can have such a huge positive impact on someone. That is the wrap up of our discussion. We do have time for some quick Q&A, so I'll hand over to my colleague Aisha to pose us some questions from the attendees.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you all. That was absolutely brilliant, really interesting, and some real key takeaways for employers and for everybody on the call. I've got time for one quick question, and for anybody that else has asked a question that hasn't been answered, we will answer it in the follow-up comms. But the one question to you all is, someone has asked, we have done some comms to managers and published on our intranet news when our domestic abuse procedure was created, and again more recently. However, it only seems to be when there is a referral for staff or volunteer, and I share it again at that time that managers are taking notice. It seems very hard to cut through the noise and busyness and all the other competing comms. Is there anything that can be done, or has anybody else had a similar issue to here? What could you do to cut through that noise? Anybody got any comments?
I'll start. So I think there's a bit of a bottom up and a top down approach to comms. So I do think it is really important to get it on leaders' agenda, and that's right, CEO and downwards. But I also think there's a real position for employee networks and people on the ground to be talking about it as well. And I think if you can do both, you kind of get the meat in the middle, which is where you then sort of like get it being talked about on a more regular basis. So definitely I'd start with your top table, so to speak, get them in all in a training session, get it on the agenda, and then also do it bottom up versus via your employee networks if you have them. I think that's quite a good way of trying to get it more on the agenda full time.
I completely agree with what Destin said, and my 2 cents as a comms manager is also about setting yourself up for success when all of the comms for the year are being planned out. So that's why I recommend that you have one of the comms team in your domestic abuse working group, just so that you make sure that everyone is aligned. There's complete synergy with all the other things that you're doing and communicating about the domestic abuse response, because that way that you're able to sneak in communications throughout the year. It's already on the calendar. You can use the external awareness days and the campaigns to make sure that, but at least for that week, we have that designated comms going out, so that you're able to sort of safeguard yourself for the future. And also, if you're able to do responsive comms, if anything big is happening out there in the world all of a sudden, for example, if the government's new violence against women and girls strategy, which encompasses domestic abuse, if that comes out, maybe that's also a hook on which you can hang some positive comms about domestic abuse. If holidays are coming up, making sure that you say, holidays are a time when we're away from work, so making sure that you stay safe, maybe sharing some resources. So planning that regular drumbeat in all the way from the beginning, I think, is really quite crucial.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. That was brilliant. I'm going to wrap up now. We've got 1 minute to spare. So if I could just say thank you again to all of our guest speakers, Virginia, Jess, and obviously our Kristen. Thank you so much. Please do use the posters. I really encourage you to share them. You can use them electronically, or you can print them out and put them on the back of toilet doors, as Kristen suggested. We'll be sharing the recording of the session today, and please follow us on socials, LinkedIn and Blue Sky. Our next Insight Hour will be on the 20th of January, looking at a new year, new commitment, taking effective action on domestic abuse in 2026. We'll be highlighting the foundations and key building blocks for implementing and embedding an effective workplace response. So please do join that session, and the registration link should be in the chat there. We'd also really welcome any feedback that you'd like to share, and any future sessions that you're interested in hearing from us. So please do complete that. It will take you a few minutes, and we really do look at that feedback and take it on board. So thank you all for coming, and see you at the next session.